Welcome to this special edition of Stories from the Strongrooms, one of 3 presentations developed to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Hull Blitz in May 1941. In this presentation, present-day children from schools around Hull narrate extracts from essays written in 1942 with the title What Happened to Me and What I Did in the Air Raids. Written by 10 to 12-year-olds from Springburn Street School, these essays are a poignant reminder of how children were affected by the relentless bombing inflicted on the city during 1941. The 29 essays held at the Hull History Centre were part of a much larger survey commissioned by scientist Solly Zuckerman, working on behalf of the Ministry of Home Security's Research and Experiments Department. Interested in the physical and psychological effects of ground shock waves and blasts, they were also keen to assess the effect such events would have on citizens' morale. As part of this research, over 2,000 essays from Hull and Birmingham schools were submitted to the survey. On the 8th of April 1942, their report, The Qualitative Study of Total Effects of Air Raids, Hull and Birmingham Survey, was published and concluded, there is no evidence of breakdown of morale for the intensities of the raids experienced by Hull or Birmingham. The University of East Anglia has kindly agreed to loan the History Centre their microfilmed set of essays written by school children from Hull during the Second World War, and details of how to access them can be found on the History Centre's website. It's not known why the 29 essays within the collections at the Hull History Centre did not join the other essays now held in the Zuckerman archive at the University of East Anglia. However, Springburn Street School suffered damage from 3 high explosive bomb blasts and from shell splinters between August 1940 and July 1941, and documents within the Council's Architect Department records confirm that the school was closed in 1942 due to the destruction of its buildings by bombs. The confusion which surely ensued must have been a contributing factor as to why the essays were not included in the main survey. This map details the area the children lived in and includes many of the streets mentioned in the essays, excerpts of which will now be read to us by children from Hull schools.
I had to be evacuated because I was so frightened when I heard the bombs dropping. I thought one was dropping near us, but it dropped at the other end of the street. I was so frightened I did not know what to do, so I went into the street. After the all clear, I collected shrapnel that came from the guns.
When it was morning, I went out and found a lot of shrapnel and pieces of mine. My father was out overnight because he was a warden at the top of our street. The fire was burning for a few days, and there was a lot of firemen.
The next morning, all the windows were broken. Our house wasn't as bad as the other houses, but all the soot out of the chimney went all over the house. All the curtains were black. Ever so many houses were demolished.
When the first 2 nights of the Blitz came, we were all in bed. But when my mother heard a plane come over, she rushed us into the shelter. Just as we got into the shelter, we heard a rushing sound. It was a landmine, and it hit my friend's house with 14 people in it, who were killed. I helped my father to see that no firebombs hit the house. My mother and I thought it was terrible. We all thought the same, and I felt too sick and ill to do anything.
The school down our street got a fire, and a number of people who lived near the school came into our shelter. When the all clear was sounded, we all gave a sigh of relief. When I went home, I had no home to go to, but there was a kind old lady who said she would put us up for the rest of the night.
When I woke up next morning and I went into the house, the windows were out, the mats were cut with glass and the furniture was cut. All the clothes were burnt. We could not go to school for a week until Mother bought me clothes. My father got his suit burned, and his raincoat too.
After we had gone into the shelter, all the window frames and glass came flying in, and just where I had been lying before, there was a great big piece of glass. If I had been lying there, I should have been cut, but as it happened, I was in the shelter.
We had 2 blitz nights, and as soon as the whistling bombs and mines were dropping, we all had to duck. One blitz night, the top of our street was all on fire, and all the people in our shelter had to go to one further up. As we went out, all the sky was lit up, and bombs were dropping and flares falling.
When the blitz was on, I was in the shelter, and when the bomb dropped down the street, I got the blast of it in my ear that made me have an earache. When it had dropped, my father went out to see where it had dropped. Then another bomb dropped that made me frightened, and he woke up my little brother. We had to evacuate to within the sea.
I thought all about what we had been through that night. I felt as though I could just go across to Germany and punch Hitler and his Nazi gang in the jaw, and I thought something else too. On the Thursday night blitz, I slept right through it, so that I have not much to say about that. Still, there were a lot of injured and killed.
Nearly all the town had to be evacuated. There were screaming bombs that dropped, and we went half in a dreadful state. The town was blazing with fires, and the school nearest was blazing. We did not know how to get it out.
Our school was bombed, and we are now at T.B. Holmes School. Then the girls' department was bombed in another raid, and we are now in the infants department, so we are now 3 schools in one.
When it was quiet, an area warden came in and said, "A bomb has fallen down the street, and it's a time bomb. You have all got to be evacuated to a building named Victoria Hall." So we all got the belongings we had with us. We had blankets, gas masks, radiation books, etc.
Now in the blitz, the sirens were sounded, and we all went into the shelter. It was terrible because the shelter was packed. When the bombs were falling, I was frightened. In the terrace next door, a mine dropped onto the shelter, and nearly all the people were killed. Only a few were saved. My mother was ill at the time, but she got into the shelter. People had to move out of some of the shelters because the top of the street was on fire, and all the people were screaming.
When the buzzers went, I went into the air raid shelter. One night a bomb dropped in our street, and I said to my mother, "When the mist clears, I will go and see what damage it has done to our house." When I did go, I found that I could not get in because the back way was all down, and I could not get in the front way either. So I went back to the air raid shelter.
I was very frightened when we had a big blitz in all kinds of districts of Hull. There was one big blitz on the Wednesday and Thursday night, and we were very frightened indeed, for we lived in Main Street. We heard a very loud, long whistle, and it was a landmine which fell in Regent Street, and it was that I was in the house at the moment, seated under the table. All of the fire flew out under the grate and burnt my leg. We all cried and screamed. I ran to the shelter. We thought there was nobody in, but there was all under the bunks.
Mum and I just got outside when a bomb fell on our house, and we just got into the shelter when the shelter fell on us and we were trapped. We were in there for 15 minutes, then some soldiers came and freed us. And then we went in buses to rest centre, and half an hour after the all clear sounds, we were all unhurt except my dad, and he hurt his arms.
Then the sirens blew on the 8th and 9th of May last year. I was asleep on the bunks which my dad had made for us when I was awakened by a sudden crash. I could hear bricks and debris falling out on our shelter top, windows crashing and guns banging. I was very frightened, and when the all clear blew, we could not go home until Mother and Dad had cleared up all the broken glass and ceiling that had fallen down. All the doors and window frames were broken, and we had to be careful of the great beams and wood which had flown through the air from somewhere and were resting on our tiles ready to fall.
They dropped 3 incendiaries on the shelter that we were in. The people were very frightening indeed. I was terrified.
When the mine fell in Bean Street, we were in bed. Nobody had knocked us up when the sirens went. All the lights had gone out. I had suddenly awakened and seen my mother awake, and she gave a yell. I felt real scared and said, "What?" But that was all I could say. The wardens burst the door down and carried us out to the shelter. When they got us there, people gave us some tea and cake. All of a sudden, a bomb fell into the next street and caused a very big fire.
Hull has had many blitz, but I think the 2 worst were on May the 8th and 9th, 1941. On May the 8th, the sirens blew out 7 p.m. For about 2 hours. Nothing was doing, and we all thought it was just an alert. Then we heard an aeroplane. Guns began to fire. We put on our outdoor clothes and ran into the passage, for we didn't go to the shelter, but ran back for the chairs.
In the next air raid, it was worse, still because bombs dropped and never went off, and it also set the convent school on fire, and it made a great mess.
There was much that happened in other raids, but I can't think of them just as the present. But I do know everyone was afraid to stop in the town at night. They used to run away anywhere to get away from the town of Hull. Even if it was to sleep in an open field, they were so frightened. I was one of those who went out to sleep, but I was one of the lucky ones. I did not have to sleep in a field.
One night when I heard the sirens and I went to tell my mother, she said, "Hurry up and we'll go into the shelter." We went into the shelter and we heard them dropping the bombs. Then the guns started. It got worse and worse, and we heard the aeroplane up above. In the next house, the people began to cry and the little children began to cry.
The second night was the same. We had 2 unexploded bombs and 2 high explosive bombs. We had a terrible experience those 2 nights. The avenue got 2 high explosive bombs and 7 fire bombs all at once. Everybody was terribly frightened and uneasy about it. Our house was damaged very seriously, but we are having it done up.
As we were going outside, the sky was red with flames. We were going by a street called Walcott Street. We saw a big fire. The slits were falling off the roof. Then we got inside. I thought of people who were in hospital.
All the railway lines were afire, and the sawmill was on fire too, so we evacuated the street and went to the church nearby. Then we had some bread and a cup of tea. When we had just had them, the all clear went. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning. When it was breakfast time, we had it and then went for a walk.
I hope we do not have any more nights like those, but if we do, we will keep our spirits up until we hear the last all clear and our friends and relatives can come home again.